and health systems, science and technology. I wish you welcome you, and I would like us to start so that we keep time. We stay within time. It is 2 minutes after 10:30. So the first presenter will be, I can see the first presentation of I'm seeing Bundi here, D Bundi, and then we will follow by L Wadono. Then we will go to G Malala and S Nyamoya. So what we will do, I suggest we take first 4. I've seen we have 10 presentations to do. So we take first 4, then we have a few minutes for questions, then we do another. So without much ado, I would like to invite D Bundi to do the presentation of the role of distributed ledger technology in provision of universal health coverage. Please remember we have 10 minutes. We have 10 minutes so that we save time. Go ahead. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Prof. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, we can hear you.
Are my slides showing? Are they moving?
Yes, go ahead, please. On to
okay.
Presentation.
Okay.
Slide.
Okay. Let me do the slideshow. I think that's okay. My name is David Kirongo. You had alluded to Dorothy Bundi. We've done the work together. Dorothy Bundi is a PhD candidate at Kabarak University. Myself, I'm at Murang'a University. I'm also a PhD student in epidemiology. Dorothy is in IT. And Dr. Amos Kirongo is also in IT. He's the Director of Research and Innovation at Mary University of Science and Technology. Our title of the paper we are presenting is Role of Distributed Ledger Technology in Provision of Universal Healthcare. A motivation area or problem that drove us into this research is our interest in utilization of applications of blockchain in securing health patient data, use of patient data, accurate patient data in effective diagnosis and treatment through secure data sharing, technological security as the challenge that hinders the provision of universal healthcare in developing countries like the country we are in. We wanted to explore existing distributed ledger technology and the adoption initiative to establish the benefits of distributed ledger technology in UHC, that is universal healthcare, and to discuss existing challenges in distributed ledger technologies in provision of universal health coverage. As per WHO, universal health coverage is a situation where all people receive the health services they require or they need to promote better health, prevent illness, and provide treatment, while at the same time, sorry? Any challenge?
Hello, are you still?
Yeah. Yes. Are you hearing me?
Yes, proceed. Yeah. There was a lag.
Okay, sorry. So I was saying, WHO universal health coverage is a situation where all people are able to receive health services they need to promote better health, prevention of illnesses, provide treatment, while at the same time protecting financial status of the patients because of the healthcare costs that we face. A distributed ledger, which is the main thing we are talking about, is a database that is consensually shared and synchronized across multiple sites, institutions, for example, hospitals, and different geographical locations, and it's accessible to multiple people. So these people are able to access the database, but they are not able to alter or to change what is in the database. The two critical features of UHC, as we know, are quality and essential health services, health service coverage. What happened?
Okay, that mode is clearer for us. Please proceed.
Oh, okay.
We are following.
Okay. You can move to the next if you can. Next slide. Okay. As I was saying, sorry about that. The two critical features of UHC are quality essential health service coverage and financial coverage, whereby we are protecting our patients for financial damage or dilapidation that comes with healthcare service seeking. UHC, as we know, in the Kenyan context, is in the Big Four agenda, which has been the flagship of the government for the last 5 years. Health also is anchored in the Constitution of Kenya and also is one of the Sustainable Development Goals, actually goal number 3 on health and wellness. So when we're looking at the DLT, the key benefits that we are looking for to attain from distributed ledger technology is to enhance patient information safety and confidentiality, continuation or continuity of patient management across public and private health facilities, and health enhancing patient data access to the healthcare providers and health insurers. DLT also enables us to track patient progress even post-discharge because all the patient information is electronically stored and it can be accessed in the same system as we use for blockchain. And it has been used to enhance authentication, confidentiality, and data sharing. It also ensures interoperability through software apps, technological platforms. Communication of the data is also secured. It is seamless and it enables exchange of data and use of the exchange data across health organizations and also app vendors. Next. You can move to the next slide, please. Okay, the challenges that we faced when we are doing a review of DLT or data in healthcare, we find that there's a lot of data fragmentation. You find that a patient visits health facility A, then health facility B, then C. There's fragmented information about the patient in different facilities. So there's a big challenge in augmenting the data about the patients to enable seamless treatment of the patient. There's also untimely access to patient data. For example, in times of emergency, you may not be aware of conditions of the patient is suffering from. For example, if they are allergic to certain drugs, if they have underlying conditions. So the data is not interwoven. So if they move to another facility, the healthcare provider has to start from the beginning. And in a bad situation, for example, if the patient is unconscious or they are unaccompanied, you may not be able to get the information from the patient. There's also lack of system interoperability. You find that public facility, private facilities use different health information management systems, and therefore transmission of information from one system to another is a big challenge. Another problem is verifiability and lack of data security in transmission of patient data across different geographical locations during the referral process. If you're moving patients from one geographical location to another, it poses a challenge to UHC because there is difficulty in verification of the authenticity of data. We can move to the next one. The key output of our paper was to come up with this conceptual framework, which may be used for further research on the use of DLTs in universal health coverage. So if you look at this conceptual framework, at the center of the conceptual framework, the core thing is to achieve secure universal health coverage through use of DLTs or distributed ledger technologies for patient data. On the top left corner, we have enhancing access to quality healthcare services for all, including the poor. So in this part, we are trying to cushion the poor and enable them to be able to access healthcare services. The other issue is to improve the financial protection and hence better economy. So if you're able to improve financial protection of our patients, we'll cushion them from dilapidation that comes with health seeking. We have to lower healthcare costs through DLTs to increase healthcare system interconnectivity and immutability, anonymity, interoperability, and transparency. As we know, patients' data is a key factor of confidentiality, and it requires a lot of security and data protection, and DLTs will ensure data protection and patient confidentiality. The last item is to increase the quality of healthcare services for all. This is by provision of all information about the patient that is required. Next, as I conclude. In conclusion, this paper presents the state-of-the-art universal health coverage using distributed ledger technology, where we are able to put the patient data in a blockchain system, same way the blockchain system as used in Bitcoin and other blockchain systems, where the healthcare provider is only to input the data of the patient to the blockchain system, and they are not able to edit or to alter the patient information. And then the data is open to all who have been given smart contracts to access the DLT data about the patient. The evolution, benefits, and challenges of DLT and potential opportunities for adoption of DLT's approaches for future provision of UHC are discussed in the full paper, and the output of this conceptual framework that it clearly depicts the impact of applying DLTs in healthcare systems. So we are actually championing and trying to come up with this concept where all patient information can be stored in a common DLT, and all healthcare providers can be given access to this DLT, and continuity of care can be ensured. I think I've come to the end of my presentation. Thank you so much. I hope I kept time, Prof.
Thank you very much, David. You've done 10 minutes and 17 seconds. Very well done.
Sure.
So we've got a few minutes to react, but we'll want to combine this and the next one. So we are going to listen to El Wandolo telling us towards a sustainable hospital-generated SHAPS management program, lessons from Migori County. So thank you. Meanwhile, we'll be loading the next one as you exit. Great. So Wandolo, the floor is yours, please. Thank you. Wandolo. Wandolo, please.
Yes, so you are getting me?
Yes, we are getting you.
Yes, so
something.
As I said, okay, as I said, mine will be very shorter. I think it will be shorter than my friend who has just left. So my name is Levis Wandolo. I'm a medical lab technologist from Masinde Muliro University of Science and Tech. We did this work with the Philip Apamo, who is the advisor for CHEB Migori. Then we have Boniface Olalo, who is the County Medical Laboratory Coordinator Migori, and then Abel Bosire is the lab manager for Migori County Referral Hospital. So the presentation outline, introduction, we have, we are going to state what the issue was, the objective, the methodology, the results, conclusion, recommendation, and acknowledgement. So what we, in our introduction, as we could all be aware, that we have a serious risk of to the environment, to the personnel, and to the facility if we do not manage our medical waste correctly. 85% of all medical waste in the hospitals are non-hazardous, but the 15% that include SHAPS are hazardous. That's according to WHO. You can read those documents later on. So there are various guidelines that have been provided by WHO on how to do waste management, including how to segregate that waste and how to treat it and how to eventually dispose of it. And the only non-infectious waste can be safely disposed of according to those guidelines, and according to just common sense, only non-infectious waste can be disposed of by open pit burning or via burning chamber. The rest of the waste, which are always highly infectious, and the infectious waste, and also the pharmaceutical waste and the sharps, they require to be to go through a process known as incineration. So let's move on to the next slide. Yes, so our problem is, if you look at the whole county of Migori, where this work was established, we have about 226 health facilities. Most of these facilities are what is called a burning chamber. As you can see, that is the picture of an example of a burning chamber, but only one machine to incinerate waste existed in the whole county as and when we were doing this particular work. I'll put an asterisk there because currently now we have two. There's one that has also been established, and they will tell you how it has affected the waste management in the whole county. So all the sub-county hospitals each have got a burning chamber. If you know, especially in medical waste management, a burning chamber cannot burn sharps, cannot burn things like glass and all that. So it means if we rely on the burning chamber, we are not going to completely dispose of the waste that we have in most of these our facilities. And therefore, we had to create a way through which this can be achieved even when we have only one incinerator. So proper waste management cannot be achieved in the absence of a machine that incinerates those particular waste and completely reduce them to ashes. Let's move to the next slide. The objective, we were to develop a sustainable waste management program through networking. Next slide. So our methodology, we did a needs assessment, then we did facility linkage, and we did costing for that process. Then personnel involvement and the program, we programmed the activity, and then we did what we set out to do. So on this assessment, we assessed the existing healthy infrastructure, the sharps burden per facility, and the potential hazard that they may cause. Some of these hazards include mechanical injury to someone. It may not even be a patient, it may be a health personnel. Mechanical injury can happen as in you are pricked by that particular needle. Also, the other thing that can happen is that this needle can be infected. It has been used on a patient, and if it pricks you, then you can get the infection from that particular patient that needle was used on. And there are so many other potential hazards that you may think about, especially when you work in a hospital. Then facility linkage, we identified the mini hubs. Hubs are just those particular facilities where we work on, and a strategic facility where sharps can move from a certain facility to a certain collection point. So if the facility was strategic, we called it a mini hub, and we used it for that particular task. Then we link the facilities to the hubs, and then the hub to the main to the main referral hospital, where that machine is placed. And then we did costing for this particular activity. Then we identified waste champions, some just the normal officer, the lab techs, and some social science cadres within the hospital. We identified them as waste champions. We gave them roles complete with a JD, and then we had facility contact persons for waste in all the health facilities that we have in Migori. Then number 4, we pooled the resources. The county, the partners on the ground pooled the resources. Then we scheduled this activity. We readied all the requirements, and then we implemented that particular activity. Let's move to the next slide. Back. Just move back. Yes, there. No. Yes, so one of the results that we can actually talk about is that we have made a SHAPS network in the county. The peripheral facilities are all linked to the nearest collection point, what I was calling the hubs. It can be a sub-county hospital or just a certain facility, but the name is the mini hub. And then the sub-county hubs are linked to the county referral hospital, where that machine is based. So what happens is the samples are collected in majority of our peripheral facilities, collected at the collection point, depending on the number of days we have chosen, and also depending on the number of SHAPS boxes that we are targeting. And then later on, they are picked from there and then taken to the county referral hospital to be interred or to be disposed of. So that is the main thing that we have achieved with this particular thing. So today, if you go to Migori County, you will find this program is working on a quarterly basis. So the SHAPS network is one of the things that we boast about. Slide next. Then the waste collection tools. We normally have a number of waste collection tools. Excuse me. We have a number of waste collection tools that have been circulated by the WHO, and in our country, the section that deals with waste management, the National Biosafety Office, they've also developed a number of tools, and all these tools are geared towards documenting the waste management process, giving like a guideline to all facilities on how they are going to deal with their waste. So we have modified some of these tools and have made them to look like what we own in our facilities, like what we can use in most of our facilities. And so we make them in such a way that they do not have a strange title. The title that is there is, for example, the one I've placed there is Migori County Medical Waste Collection Log, as opposed to something that has come from WHO. We're only going to quote the source, but the main topic, the main headline of some of these tools do not have to bear the name of, for example, WHO. So that we find this idea has been bought by most of our facilities, and they are using it when it has our local name. Next. And then for this one exercise that we did, for example, in 2018, we managed to do 1,500 filled SHAPS boxes. This is because we had quite some backlog before then, but when we implemented this activity, we did incinerate over 1,500 SHAPS boxes. You can look at the figure per sub-county. Then, since then, additional sub-counties have been brought into the program. Hence, the whole county is now covered. So we do a quarterly SHAPS management activity. They collect them in the health facilities, but this collection is done once every quarter at a cost that is affordable to us. Let's move on. And then the last thing about the results is process ownership. As we know, the laboratory departments spearhead the process currently, and I think this is applicable in most of the areas where, in most of the hospital setup. But in the absence of lab, we have facility in charges that run the activity. The facility in charges are other cadres, maybe in most areas apart from the lab cadre. And so waste management has now become part of the weekly continuous medical education in most of these facilities. And all waste types are now brought into the network. We not only do SHAPS now, there are a lot of waste that follows this particular process. As you know, Migori County is one of the areas where we do VMMC. We circumcise the residents in a bid to reduce infections of HIV. And so most of those ways, like what comes out like the foreskins, it is through this network that we are able to get rid of them. And so all the 8 sub-counties are now involved. Next.
Please note time.
Pardon?
Time is not on our side.
Okay, about 3. So best practices, we have a lot of them, but we just wanted to showcase these 2. You look at on your left, the left-hand side of your screen, the recommended WHO bins that should be used for waste. But in our facilities, in the absence of that, because some of them are very expensive, they have opted to use just the normal bucket, but with color-coded liners that help us also to segregate those waste. So that is something that we must showcase next. And then the waste holding areas, before the quarter ends, there are these sharps in our facility, so they must be kept in our place. So this is an old toilet in one of the sites. They did not want to get rid of it, so they modified it in such a way that it can be used as a storage for sharps. And this is something that we are very happy of to talk about next. So installation and to install and to maintain some of these machines are very costly for the county and may not be met by most of our facilities. And then the cost of networking is far less compared to the cost of managing hazards that arise when we do not manage them properly. So we recommend that medical waste, we segregate this waste at the source, and then each county, for example, develop a workable networking program that is going to help them manage their waste. And then where support for the others comes along, some facilities can be offloaded from the previous network and linked to the new one that has come. Let's move on. I think that's the end. We acknowledge the CHEP program in Migori and the MOH Migori towards the activity to manage waste. And then we also acknowledge the entire medical lab fraternity in the county for spearheading this particular activity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Wandolo. We began very well, but we dropped some minutes here. We got 14 minutes just about. So let's move on as we get, is G Malala in? Is G Malala in? Meanwhile, thank you, Wandolo, for your presentation. We should be able to pick up and recover lost time. Is G Malala in, please?
Yes, that is Gertrude Malala and Pamela Onyango.
Okay, G Malala, please. Meanwhile, colleagues, as you come in, you're the one called Technospark. As you come in, please use official names so that we can trace whether you're in.
So this is Pamela Onyango.
Yeah, so Pamela, please.
The paper has been authored by Pamela Onyango and Gertrude Malala. So I will do the presentation. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Yes,
morning, so please proceed.
Yes, so this is a study on psychological effects of COVID-19 pandemic on the mental well-being among secondary school students in Kenya. Next slide, please. Next slide. So at the onset of COVID-19 pandemic, there was a lockdown and of course other methods of restriction. And this was a great blow to so many students who had to go home in a situation in Kenya by July 2020, as even indicated by UNESCO 2020. And we realized that developed countries had experienced interruptions because learning had to be virtual. And this, of course, had its own costs and the facilities that were required. And we realized that in Kenya too, efforts were made by the Ministry of Education. And we have also Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development, which attempted to implement virtual learning so that learners would be engaged. Next slides, please. So we realized that there was lack of access by most learners And this is because of related economic background issues as put forward by Mabea in the year 2020. So this, of course, brought with it a lot of anxiety among the learners who are not able to be in a situation of learning. Our next slide. Next slide. Next slide, please. Next slide is about statement of the problem. It's about this one, statement of the problem. Okay, so in the statement of the problem, actually, this study investigates the psychological effects of COVID-19 pandemic on the mental well-being among secondary school students. This is because there's so much that has been done regarding psychological effects of COVID-19 pandemic in institutions of higher learning, and not so much has dwelt on secondary school students. And that is actually why this study was done. So we realized that as a result of the effects of the COVID-19 and of course the measures of restriction, a lot of inequality issues that came about because of lack of access due to economic background of the learners brought in psychological effects that in this case would be equated to feelings, would indicate like anxiety, stress, panic. And it was important actually to find out what happened or what is happening to the secondary school student. So I want to take us to the scope of the study. This study is confined to the psychological effects of COVID-19 pandemic on the mental well-being of the learners. I realized that probably we are not able to move together with the slides, but it's okay. Let me just carry on. So the study is confined in secondary schools in Bondo sub-county of Kenya, and the findings can be generalized from the sample representation in Bondo. Thank you for that. We are now at par. What about the significance of the study? The study might educate the stakeholders in education on the general psychological challenges that are faced by learners, and more so in secondary school, and how their mental well-being can be nurtured. The study also might inform policy decisions on development mechanisms of coping with psychological challenges, and more so in the post-pandemic period. I will just say a few things as regarding literature review, which actually is contained in my next slide. Of course, the effects, the psychological effects of COVID-19 pandemic have been felt globally, and education and the learner have not been left untouched. So in Kenya, we have the Ministry of Education together with other stakeholders. So the ministry developed a COVID-19 response and recovery plan. And it was actually important to find out how this accommodates the learner in the era of COVID-19 pandemic. My next slide is on methodology. So this study has adopted descriptive research design, and it attempts to assess and measure psychological parameters The population, as I had mentioned before, is secondary school students. We have teachers also, where we include teacher counselors, stratified sampling of schools into categories. This is because Bondo sub-county is composed of national schools, county schools, and sub-county schools. Krejci and Morgan's Krejci and Morgan sampling table will be used to design the sampling frame. Would also employ questionnaires for students and teachers, and interview schedules for the teachers. There's also the depression, anxiety, and stress scale that will be used to gather information. So this scale has 21 items, and the items are concerned about the psychological well-being of the population concerned in this study. So we have such areas as that the depression, anxiety, and stress scale, just to mention a few of the items contained. We have items like, I couldn't experience any positive feeling. I experienced trembling. I felt agitated. So such are the areas that the DAS 21 investigates. So ethical considerations would be taken into account, confidentiality, anonymity. And I would want to say that this is an ongoing study. Otherwise, I want to appreciate you for taking your time to listen to my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pamela, for we'll be looking to hear maybe during the discussion what are some of the preliminary findings you've got. We've done very well with time. We are at 9 minutes. So I would like members to inform you, we've got a request by Dr. Mwita saying he has something to attend to. He would like to make his presentation now. That means we bring it up just before the one for Dr. Nyamweya, so that we listen to Dr. Mwita. Dr. Mwita, are you with us?
Thank you so much, Professor Obonyo. Thank you for accepting my request. Really grateful for that. Yes, this is Dr. Mwita. I'm ready to present.
Please, do you have your slide ready with you?
I had requested somebody. I sent somebody in your team. I think Regina or Leonard.
Yes, she's here with me also. So
I don't know that Regina has my slides, whether she can put them up. I had requested because I'm having challenges presenting them. I don't know how to do that.
No problem. We are here to assist.
Thank you so much, Professor.
Now that we have a minute, I could ask Pamela. Now that you presented what we call ongoing study, what are the preliminary findings as Regina is loading? Maybe a very 30-second, very short. What are your preliminaries, Pamela?
Thank you, Prof. I would want to say that actually this was a proposal, and we have put it up. And we are now in the process of collecting data. Yes. So yes.
Sorry about that. So Pamela, you're saying in the process of collecting data. I would still follow up. I would still follow up with that one. I'd like to hear more. Meanwhile, let's listen to Dr. Mwita, who has something to attend to, and then we'll continue. Thank you. So over to you, Dr. Mwita.
Thank you so much, Professor. Sorry for not having muted my mic, and I'm sure, I don't know, for that misconduct, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, you have 10 minutes.
Okay, we are presenting on a study which is done, already published work. We are comparing two systems to be able to manage cervical cancer lesions, and that is our title. And we are with my student here, Mr. Nyamai Munyoki from Masinde Muliro, University of Science and Technology, and my name is Dr. Esther Mwita from Murang'a University of Technology. Next slide, please. Okay, cervical cancer is a reproductive tract disease in women, and it is of high mortality rate globally and also here in our local situation in Kenya. Most counties in Kenya do not have a well-maintained cancer registry, and we felt it was important for the purpose of being able to present findings on management of cervical cancer. We wanted to actually compare the two systems which are applicable in being able to diagnose and to manage the cervical cancer lesions. Next slide, please. Laboratory screening of cervical cancer can be done through the two levels I've just said. We have preliminary screening, which is done through cytology. So this is through the examination of cervical smears done from cervical scraping the cervix. So meaning you have to speculate the women as you're examining them so that you can expose the cervix. The other way, the more diagnostic way of being able to actually diagnose for cervical cancer is using the gold standard, which is a histology method. So with cytology, you're looking at cells through smears, but with histology, you actually obtain the tissue biopsy, process it, and then you're able to stain it and screen it and examine it, so that you can be able to make a more confirmatory diagnosis for cervical cancer. Next slide, please. So the way that we grade the lesions through cytology is through a classification system where we'll say if the smears are normal, meaning there are no atypical or abnormal cells, and then a higher level of if you're able to see a few abnormal cells, and that is a classification known as atypical squamous cells of undisclosed severity. And then the third level of being able to see the higher severity of cells in smears is a grade known as the low-grade squamous intraepithelial lesions. And then a more severe form of atypical or abnormal cells is classified as high-grade squamous intraepithelial lesions. That is for cytology when you're examining smears. However, when you are examining tissue sections from biopsies, we also use a particular screening classification, and it's threefold. We have the cervical intraepithelial neoplasia, grade 1. And then we have the same, which is a grade 2, and then we have the highest severest form through examination of tissue sections is known as the cervical intraepithelial neoplasia grade 3. Next slide, please. This is just a reference on how the two classifications of both cytology and histology are explained from two papers that we have been using. So my colleague will highlight on the gap that we identified in being able to compare the two systems of cytology and histology.
Thank you. Cytology basically is a screening test, while histology, the gold standard, is a diagnostic test. In most of facilities in Kenya, cytology is available, but in many of the facilities, histology is not available. And therefore, it is very hard to start management until you have the gold standard, which is histology. And due to this gap, therefore, when do we need to check which level can we begin management while we have the cytology results as we wait for the histology results? Because we know cancer of the cervix is highly metastasis.
Okay, so our objectives as per that problem of gap that we identified in being able to say that we can actually use cytology as a gold standard, especially for settings, for low resource settings. So we are looking at the equivalency. At what stage can we, is cytology through the grading of the Bethesda score comparable to histology through the grading of the Riker score for histology. So for us to be able to see the equivalency of cytology and histology, we were applying a kappa test. And this will also confirmed through accuracy and precision by plotting an inter-observer reliability test or the McNamara test. Now, to be able to compare the performance of cytology and histology, we also conducted more examinations and tests to be able to test the sensitivity, the specificity, and the predictive value of both the Bethesda system in comparison to the Riker score. Next test, please. Next slide. In our methodology, the study was located in Machakos Level 5 Hospital, where we were able to collect smears, and we were also able to look at tissue sections or biopsies from the cervix. Our design was a descriptive cross-sectional study. It was purposive because we first of all had to do a viability test to be able to identify abnormal cervixes before we could collect smears as well as tissue sections. We sampled 176 women who attended the maternal child clinics and the gynecology outpatient of Machakos Level 5, and these women were of age criteria of at least above 22 years of age, and they must have at least consented to participate and also were sexually active, and in our exclusion criteria, we had to ensure that they had not been subjected to surgical hysterectomy, that is removal of the cervix and the uterus, and were not also immunized against the human papilloma virus, which is actually a vaccine given to prevent cervical cancer. Next slide, please. We also applied a questionnaire, an open-ended one, where we were able to get the demographics. Our laboratory data, of course, was from smears for cytology and tissue sections for the biopsy. And then to grade the smears or to screen the smears, we were using the Bethesda system. And for tissue sections, the biopsy tissue sections, we were using the Riker score. Next slide, please. So these are our results, our baseline. We're able to get frequencies, percentages, median ranges. Smears, we were using the Bethesda score. We're able to give the 4-tier criteria of being able to see abnormal cytological cellular features. For biopsy, we're using the 4-tier Richard score scale, and we're able to look at the relationship of both dependent and interdependent variables and do a regression just to be able to look at the levels of prevalence and probabilities. And we also performed the tests that were able to confirm for us the analogy or the similarity or equivalences of the two tests, the accuracy, the sensitivity, specificity, as well as the predictive value. And we plotted receiver operative characteristic curve just to be able to see how associated were these two tests so that we could use cytology also as a gold standard at some point for managing cervical cancer lesions. Next slide, please. In our results, we were able to show that there was analogy between the Bethesda system for cytology and the Riker score for histology. We obtained a t-value of 4.265 at a p-value of 0.05. Although we're not able to get a statistically significant probability, we use the inter-observer reliability or McNamara test just to further see the accuracy of the Bethesda score system in cytology in comparison to the Riker score. These results demonstrated a significant association of 0.035, which implies that the accuracy and precision of the Bethesda score relative to the Riker score was equally as good in being able to actually diagnose cervical cancer lesions. Next slide, please. These are our results of analogy between the Bethesda score and the Riker score, showing the t-value. The McNamara score, which was giving us the accuracy and precision off the Bethesda score relative to the right cut score. The sensitivity was at 88%. The specificity of the Bethesda score for cytology was at 61%. And our positive predictive value was 49%. And our negative predictive value was at 93%. Using the Bethesda score in comparison to histology using the right cut score. Next slide, please. Performance of the Bethesda score sensitivity, specificity, and predictive value. We plotted the receiver operating characteristic curves and were able to show that the sensitivity was 88% of cytology using the Bethesda score in all examined 176 smears, and the specificity was at 61% of the Bethesda score relative to the right cut score in all examined 176 smears. Next slide, please. That is our ROC curve, the receiver operating characteristics curve showing a probability value of 0.001. We conducted a predictive value, the McNemar test for accuracy of the Bethesda, and it gave us a positive predictive value of 95% and a negative predictive value of 95. At a probability of 0.001 at 95% confidence interval, giving us a very high sensitivity of cytology relative to the right cut score of histology. Next slide, please. The positive prediction of lesions in the Bethesda system, the Bethesda system graded smear, shows a positively identified atypical cell, confirming that the way we would see abnormal cells in smears is the way we would see atypical lesions in tissue. A negative prediction, where we have a suspected lesion in smear, was identified as a benign or almost or normal tissue from biopsy examined sections. Next slide, please. We also performed a multivariate logistic regression just to be able to compare the two systems. And in the model, we were able to show that after controlling for confounding factors, we're able to show an odds ratio at 95% confidence interval, a significantly associated odds ratio. Next slide, please. Sorry, this slide you may not be able to see it well, but you can see our probability values are highlighted in red, showing us the comparisons of cytology to histopathology, and the associated likelihood of Bethesda and Reichert score is at 5.068, which shows that at that rate, it is 5 times likely associated with the cytology, or the Bethesda score is likely associated to the histology. And also at the low grade squamous intraepithelial lesions are twice associated with the Reichert score, also highlighted with high probability values of 0.001. Next slide, please.
Time.
Okay, in normal cytology features, the odds of acquiring normal histology outcomes are 5 times, as we have seen in the table, and the likelihood of finding low-grade cervical lesions were twice. Next slide, please. So, in conclusion, the Bethesda score of cytology acquired considerable magnitude of similarity in analogy, accuracy, and reliability, and it also acquired high sensitivity, specificity, as well as positively associated predictive values. It is the cytology of the Bethesda system is an effective test for assessing cervical cancer lesions, and these outcomes validate the Bethesda system for cytology being considered as worthy for cervical cancer diagnostic tool in low risk settings where histology is not available. So we are just assuring and actually validating that the Bethesda system of cytology can be used in areas where histology is not available, and especially in clinical areas of low resource settings. Next slide, please. Our references for all our tests that we conducted, the kappa, the MAC-NEMA, predictive values, they are all listed there. Next slide, please. We want to acknowledge all our 176 women participants from Machakos Level 5. We want to acknowledge the institutions that provided the clinical expertise, the hospital, the institutions, the university institutions, and to all the supervising team and our PhD students. This work is actually published, and that is the reference to be able to see more on our work. Thank you for your time. We appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Mwita. Please do not exit the scene. I'm aware you have an issue to attend to. Yes. We've done 15 minutes of your presentation, and I can see it's eliciting reactions. So members, please allow me to modify our program a little bit. Because Dr. Mwita would like to leave, and it would be good to hear some questions responding to some issues here. So I'd like us to proceed on to take a round of questions. Maybe we can take maybe 3 minutes of our time to take some questions and then we proceed. What is your opinion? It's rather intrusive. The second one I saw here has to do, there is no, statistics is showing there is no significant differences between the two methods you're proposing to use at 5%. The rule of thumb generally in medical practice is to work at 99%. So 2 questions for you. I'm seeing a hand up there. Oh, and another one. 2 more hands. Professor Maranga, maybe let's have your question and say to whom it's directed very briefly.
Thank you, Professor Bonyo. My question is directed to Dr. Muya. Dr. Muya, we want to thank you for the work you're doing and with your student on verifying some of the diagnostic tools we use in medicine. Now, one very interesting aspect that I'm seeing in the data that you presented is that you've relied on a sample from one hospital. I'm wondering how different users would have been if you consider more than one hospital setting. Thank you.
Thank you, very clear. Professor Rose, let's hear you briefly.
Thank you, Jack. Can you hear me?
Yes, we are hearing.
Sorry, I had issues with logging in, but I'm now okay. Thank you for that. Can I be able to raise 2 questions?
Yes,
one to Dr. Mwita, who has just presented. I am seeing that her inclusion criteria, she had women from 22 years onwards. I was just wondering, what is the magic on the 22 years being the inclusion criteria for the women? And of course, the other one has been asked, but I was thinking for the purpose of this presentation, the area they are working on is highly sensitive and very educative. I also want to support Dr. Kitetu, Professor Kitetu, that she could have used a friendly language so that we understand, because as far as I'm concerned, this has already been published. So she's doing what is called dissemination. And as you disseminate, you use a friendly language so that people fully understand and appreciate. And I also agree that being in the medical term, histology has been a gold standard for diagnostics. And the cytology that she's suggesting, I saw some very low percentages for sensitivity and specificity, which is actually a concern for medics, because for sure, for you to have a gold standard, it means that it has to be 99% confidence limit. And I was seeing this was less. I have another question for the Migori participant. I didn't get his name, who was proposing use of new, what do we call them, for disposal of waste materials.
The shops, that's $1.
Yes, my concern and question is also very simple. Is it just about the coloring of the dustbins or the disposals, or there is something else? Because as a lab person, I fully understand that it is very, very important that whatever you dispose, you also have other measures so that, because we have viruses, we have bacteria, we have all those, that some of them are airborne and the rest. So what other things did they bring into consideration so that they can say that can be used as a standard for disposing those waste materials?
Thank you.
Chair.
Thank you for very clear questions. I'm seeing another hand. Let's take this one as the last one. Then we have initial reaction. David Kirongo, your hand is raised.
Yes, Prof. Thank you for the opportunity. I just have one question which my predecessor has already alluded to Andolo. I saw the modification of the bins and the coding that he was showing that they've done from the WHO recommended bins. My question is, are the bins covered? I didn't see any covers. And also, being that they are dealing with hazardous waste, it is good practice to have a pedaled bin so that you don't have to touch the bin where you're disposing the waste, and also to keep the waste covered to avoid, other hazards that may arise from the waste. So have they considered that in that modification? Thank you, Prof.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to invite Dr. Mwita. Dr. Mwita, there is also another one, and let's call this one the last one for now. You have this question here, that the work has potential benefits surveillance. I seek clarification on the baseline prevalence that was used to calculate NPV and PPV. Forgive me if you read the business journals, NPV means net present value. So Clarence, I don't know whether that's what you use, less jargon. But meanwhile, Dr. Mita, let's start with you. I have quick response. I've seen we've stopped for 5 minutes already.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you so much. It means our work as an institute of interest. I really appreciate, and I'm feeling flattered right now. So I want to start with a question on why we chose a participation of women of 22 years. This is in the National Policy for Cervical Cancer Screening in our country. And moreover, we had to be sure that these women had already started sexual debutation. We cannot be sure for underage girls, and we needed consent for anybody who's under 18. And in our policy for cervical cancer screening, we start at 22 years. I don't know whether that answers
Okay, thanks. Briefly on to the next one, the ones you can quickly.
Okay, thank you. The next one was a question on why Machakos County, why we did not consider other counties. My colleague can answer that.
Machakos County was one of the counties that were marked for universal coverage. Number two, Machakos County, with some other counties, they were marked to begin what we call cancer registries. So it became a county of interest.
Okay, thank you.
Another question was on the NPV and PPV. This stands for negative predictive value and positive predictive values. They are used to gauge how sensitive and how specific a test, when you're comparing two tests, you want to be able to compare. If one is being used as a gold standard and you want to use the other one to be able to see the analogy and the equivalence, you actually conduct these tests. So for specificity, sensitivity, and prediction of value, predictive value. The next question was somebody.
Yes, take this one. Take this one. Take this one about the intrusiveness.
Which one?
Invasive. This question about
the intrusive.
Yes. Let's hear you.
Thank you, Professor. Yes. We do agree these are very intrusive. This was a very
someone. Did we lose you? Sorry.
Professor, can I just restate that question, please? I know we are out of time.
Sorry. Let me get us back. Muita.
Yes, yes.
You are in the middle of answering, and then the person who posed the question would like to restate it. So let's get a clear version of this question. Okay. Go ahead, Professor.
Thank you. Actually, mine is this. I'm not so much on the research that they did, which I actually appreciate. I'm asking, is there another way of getting these samples without all that poking and okay, whatever else goes on, which is very intrusive for the patient or even those who want to just their normal checkup?
So, Prof, I actually restated the same question in a more friendly way. So, on to Dr. Muita, please respond there, the intrusion part. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for the kind word from our participant about the intrusion. Okay, when you look at the level of intrusion of cytology and histology, cytology is more kind. But we have tumor markers. But the tumor markers, they don't give us the extent of the damage that the cells have been damaged. So it is painful, but it is helpful. The benefit exceeds the pain. Thank you.
Okay, members, allow me to give direction. I've seen we pause for 3 minutes. We've already done 9 minutes. Allow me to invite that. Meanwhile, Levis, you have a question which you respond to at some point. Pamela, you also had some responses to take, which I think we pushed towards. So I want us to invite Dr. Nyamweya to give us perspective about COVID. Is it coming again, or what is immunology telling us? Are we facing it or facing away from it? Thanks. Dr. Nyamweya?
Can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead. Again, we do 9 minutes with you. Thanks.
I thought in the program it was written 15. Okay.
No. Reality on the ground is a bit different.
Okay. Can you see my presentation now?
Yes, please go ahead.
Good. Needless to say that COVID-19 means coronavirus disease discovered 2019. I'm going to give an immunological perspective. My name is Dr. Nyamweya of the Department of Human Pathology, Egerton University. As for introduction, and I hope my language will be very friendly because I have realized there are some non-scientists in the room. 19 caused by a virus in short called SARS-CoV-2, because there is CoV-1, has been around for slightly over 2 years and has claimed more than 5.7 million people and infected over 375 million. However, there have been effective vaccines that were quite rapidly developed, which actually have reduced transmission. They have also reduced the severity of the disease and deaths. Initially, the vaccine coverage was very patchy due to disparities in global access and due to vaccine hesitancy. Some people are not sure what is this they were being given. Some of the vaccines given so far, the main ones are about 4. There is Pfizer, there is Moderna, there is AstraZeneca and Janssen. However, to be able to reach the world sufficiently in order to achieve what we call a herd immunity, we need, if you are giving a 1-dose vaccine, you need about 5.3 vaccine doses. If you are giving a multi-dose vaccine, you need about 12 to 16 million doses. And that, you know very well, that looks a challenge. So in this paper, we are going to examine observations from studies that discusses some of the which causes COVID-19 to help us predict the future of the COVID-19 pandemic. Some of the questions being asked about the future of COVID-19 is: 1, to what degree will this disease continue to play a role in our lives? You know very well it has distorted our lives. Will it remain a threat to health or an infection just posing no threat? Will the children encounter it, acquire mild infection and develop immunity against it, meaning then the future generation will be immune? What type of long-term association will man and the virus establish in the long term? Will mass vaccination lead to the end of the pandemic? And are we likely to eradicate the pandemic? And if so, when and how? Now, does comparisons with the other coronaviruses help to predict the future of COVID-19? That is, if we're able to compare it with other viruses, especially the coronaviruses, will it help us to predict how it's going to be, because these are new disease? The COVID-19 virus actually differs with the other coronaviruses that cause common cold, and I've listed some of them there, in that the coronavirus, the COVID-19 virus, the SARS-CoV-2, has got higher virulence, but when it's compared to some of the more serious coronaviruses like SARS-CoV-1, sorry, one is missing there, and Middle East, the MERS-CoV-1, it is more frequently, it's comparatively, than COVID-19 is more asymptomatic more frequently. When it's compared to other human coronaviruses, the COVID-19 virus has got a higher capacity to evolve that outstrips the others. It has also got a higher capacity to evolve global variants. So looking at the fact that this virus is quite different from the common virus, then the studies from the previously studied common viruses, even coronavirus does not help us to predict the future of COVID-19 much. Now, the vaccines, what is the role of vaccines in the future of the COVID-19? As we know, when the disease came and there was no vaccine, everybody shuttered. We all ran to our houses. But shortly, as I said earlier, vaccines were developed. And the role of vaccines is, of course, to prime the immune system to rapidly mount an immune response that can mitigate the effects or rather the consequences of any repeated infection. What we have achieved so far is that we have developed very rapidly safe and highly active vaccines. You have seen all of them in the market. And then, but there are some issues still with these vaccines. The mechanisms of protection are not well understood. The extent of protection, especially against infection which does not show symptoms, is not well understood. The duration of vaccine-induced immunity is quite not as much as long as we would have expected. So these are some of the challenges or issues with those vaccines. We also have, when we compare giving vaccines and those who have acquired immunity as a result of infection, there are also differences. Those who have acquired vaccines and those who have got immunity as a result of natural infection, their immunities are quite different. We are going to see something shortly about that. And then it's important to note that once you've been vaccinated, the immunity wanes. That rather reduces between about 6 to 9 months, which then necessitates booster shots. It's not like when you get vaccinated, for example, if you are like vaccinated against measles, you become immune for life. For COVID-19, the immunity wanes, and every 6 to 9 months, you may need a booster. So meaning we have to have a very high coverage and maintain active surveillance to be able to keep the disease under control. Again, there are reservoirs who can reintroduce the virus. They are under-vaccinated people, either due to poor access or those who resist vaccination due to religious or other fears. And we also have a good number of children who don't see the need, or let me call them youths, who don't see the need for being vaccinated, who may act as vectors because they themselves exhibit an infection without symptoms. So they may end up passing the problem and the disease. Now, I want to talk about a phenomenon that may interest you called hybrid or superimmunity and what it portends for the future of COVID-19. I said a minute ago that the immunity you get from natural infection, I hope people are hearing me.
Yes.
Hello, Professor Bonyo.
Yes, very well
Professor, we
indeed.
are hearing you.
You're so quiet. I thought I was talking to myself.
No, we are following
We
you.
are following keenly.
Yes, I was saying, as I said a few minutes ago, there is a difference between the immunity that you get when you get the disease, which you call natural infection, and the immunity that you get when you are vaccinated. They are quite different. What is the difference? When you get natural infection, you get, or that triggers antibodies that grow in potency and breadth is over for about a year or slightly over. But when you get vaccinated, most of these antibodies start waning weeks or months after even the second dose. So basically we are saying the kind of immunity we get from natural infection is a bit more potent, more broad than the one you get from vaccination. So what is hybrid or super immunity then? Something that may interest you is that if you have been infected and then you are vaccinated, you have a much stronger immune response than if you have been vaccinated and you had not been infected before. Even if you are given 2 doses of vaccines, you are much worse off than somebody who has been infected, survived, and then got vaccinated. So those who have been infected and then got vaccinated, that's why we say hybrid. They have immunity from natural infection. They also have immunity from the vaccine. Their antibodies are better in neutralizing many coronaviruses, including those which tend to evade the immune system, like the beta variant. Now, what about if you compare a person who has been infected then vaccinated with someone who has had COVID but has not been vaccinated? Again, the one who has been vaccinated after infection is twice more protected than somebody who has just got the infection and not been vaccinated. So this confirms the effect of vaccination, especially even if you have survived the infection. So super immunity or hybrid is where you have been infected and then you get vaccinated, which gives a very good response. So now, however, I mean, it's important to note that the antibodies from people who have only been vaccinated and have not had any prior coronavirus infection naturally, they are fairly more useless against those viruses that we call mutants that have changed. So ideally, what we are saying in short is you need to be vaccinated after you have been infected, and that you are much better off than if you have got just vaccines alone, even if they are 2 doses. What is the mechanism of action? How come somebody who has been infected is much better protected? The reasoning or the rationale here is when you get a natural infection, you trigger the responses that your immune system triggers are not just about the spike proteins. Actually, most vaccines just target the spike proteins, but a natural infection targets more proteins than just the spike proteins, meaning the kind of immunity that you get is more broad. So the memory B cells, and B cells are the ones that produce antibodies, the memory B cells that you produce are more likely to make antibodies that can block a wide range of variants. So if then you are vaccinated thereafter, those ones are boosted and your immunity becomes much better. So the significance of this is that we should take advantage of any natural infection where it has occurred, followed with vaccines to enhance immune protection. And this may help bring the end of the pandemic closer. But somebody may ask me, what about, I mean, you are not going to look for the disease to infect you so that you are vaccinated after to have a good immunity. So what of the last bullet point? What about those people who have been uninfected? For these, a third booster dose is a must. One dose and second dose, good enough, good but not very good, but not good enough. If you have to achieve the level of hybrid or super immunity, you need a booster dose. And there is a study that has done this and shown that people who have got a booster dose are equivalent to those who have been infected and then vaccinated. So there is hope, even for those of us who may have been uninfected, but have got vaccines. You need up to a third booster dose to have similar levels of protection.
Dr. Nyamoya, please note we are out of time. We have 13 minutes already.
Now, so then I have confused me. Okay, something else.
Just conclude.
Yes. Something else to note. A study was done among 52 individuals. These individuals had been exposed or lived with people who had COVID. Half of them had COVID, the other half did not. What was the difference? For those who did not get COVID, even if they had been exposed to people who had COVID, what was found is that they had got an immunity. I mean, they had got these who did not get COVID had been exposed to people who had a common cold. Some of the common colds are as a result of some coronaviruses. So there's kind of cross immunity. And so the common cold can also have some protection. However, not all common colds are due to coronaviruses. So we can't rely on common cold to give us protection. But if you have been exposed to common cold caused by coronaviruses, you may have some protection. As I wonder, so then what do we think is the future of COVID-19 looks like? One, we have to accept that we have to coexist with the virus, which is not going away anytime soon. But the severity of the virus or the infection will go down because more and more people are having increased immunity. And some of the related coronaviruses, like some causing a common cold, may also help boost our immunity. We hope that with the time, more rapid diagnostic tools for surveillance of the disease could be more accessible and more affordable. So the situation is actually getting better. But we need to insist that children get vaccinated so that they don't become a source of infection. Eradication, very unlikely from the immunology point of view. We are likely to live on with the disease. On conclusion, overall, the future of the control of COVID-19 looks good. Several positive steps have been taken and a lot continues to happen. The immunity of people with the infection is fast improving. More studies and data on common human coronaviruses are needed. And a few key questions need to be answered, like the epidemiology of the disease. It needs to be understood more, the immunology, the virology, missing more prophylactic and therapeutic tools.
Thank you.
But we need vaccines to be able to address conserved regions of the virus for the future to be much better. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. We've done 16 minutes. The reason why we allocated 15 is so that you use 10 to present and then 5 for questions. Though I've seen we have so many questions for you already, I'd like you to look at them in the chat so that we don't eat the next presenter. Meanwhile, we should
share so that I can see them.
Yes, meanwhile, we should be preparing to listen to Leishmaniasis. Leishmaniasis here. That is the presentation of MD Chepkemoi, Leishmaniasis. Please, again, let's try and use time wisely. Meanwhile, Dr. Nyamoya, you could be looking at the chat and then responding. Is MD Chepkemoi in?
Yes, I'm in, Prof.
Okay, prepare to load your slides. Again, help us with time. Help us with time as we transition to viewers. Thank you. Feel free and engage.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we have it. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Prof, for the opportunity. I'm Damaris Chepkemoi, and I'm going to present a review on the current trends in leishmaniasis treatment in Kenya. The authors are Mutai Damaris Chepkemoi and Professor Rose Odhiambo from Egerton University, Department of Biological Sciences. These cases of the epidemics which have been currently experienced in Marsabit County and the Nakuru County. Answer the introduction. Leishmaniasis is a parasitic disease caused by the protozoans of Leishmania parasites. These Leishmania parasites are over 20 types. They are caused different types of forms of disease. And leishmaniasis accounts for over 1.2 million cases of infection globally. In Kenya, Kenya is endemic to cutaneous leishmaniasis, visceral, and the post-Kalaza dermal leishmaniasis. In the recent past, there have been an increase in the cases of visceral leishmaniasis and cutaneous leishmaniasis, which have been reported from Marsabit and Gilgil sub-counties. The next slide, please. The objective of the review was to summarize the leishmaniasis distribution in Kenya, and then to identify the current trends on leishmaniasis treatment in Kenya and in the world, and then to highlight the role of KEMRI and the drugs for neglected disease initiatives on the leishmaniasis diagnosis and treatment studies, and also was to discuss on the vaccines which are under development. Next slide, please. Through our findings, we found that Kenya, the endemic zone for cutaneous leishmaniasis is the Mount Elgon region, Nakuru, and Nyandarua, while the visceral leishmaniasis is endemic to arid and semi-arid regions. These include Kitui, Wajir, Garissa, Laikipia. Also, Baringo, West Pokot, Marsabit, Isiolo are some of the major hotspots for visceral leishmaniasis transmission. So there are also reports for the current outbreaks, suggesting that the disease has spread to new foci. This has been reported in the counties of Kajiado and Tharaka Nithi. Next slide, please. Onto the leishmaniasis treatment. The current drugs for leishmaniasis are really limited, and since 70 years ago, we have been using pentavalent antimonials, which are the standard care for treating all the types of leishmaniasis. And then Kenya recommends the use of paromomycin and sodium stibogluconate combination therapy for treating leishmaniasis, visceral leishmaniasis. In the case of individuals with visceral leishmaniasis and HIV co-infection in expectant mothers, and also in children below 2 years and adults above 45 years, the Ministry of Health recommend the use of liposomal amphotericin B. The factors which one needs to consider for treating the disease include the age, the parasite subspecies, presence of co-infections, and the geographic region where the patient is from. This table presents the current leishmaniasis treatments, the mode of action, dosage, advantages, and the limitation. The first one, the pentavalent antimonials. The major one are the sodium stibogluconate, or the pentostam, and meglumine antimoniates, or the glucantamine. The mode of action, it is proposed, currently the mode of action is currently unknown, though it is proposed that SSG interfere with the DNA of the parasite, while glucantamine increase kills the parasite by increased phagocytic activity and the production of superoxide anions. This drug is administered either through IV, intralesional administration, intramuscular, for a duration of 30 days, that is as a monotherapy. But when it is used in combination therapy, the duration of treatment is reduced to 17 days. Studies have shown that the drug efficacy is above 93.6% in East Africa if one adheres to the treatment for a period of 6 months. And also, these treatments are available free of charge at the county levels hospitals. Also, there are some of the limitations which are associated with the drugs. These include painful IV and intralesional injection, severe side effects like hepatotoxicity, cardiotoxicity, inflammation of the pancreas, and then also there is the need of hospitalization for monitoring. The next slide, please. And the paromomycin, this drug kills the parasite by inhibiting their protein synthesis. The drug is administered intravenously or intramuscularly at a dosage of 15 milligrams per kilogram per day for a period of 21 days as a monotherapy or as a combination therapy for a period of 17 days. The studies have indicated that the drug has excellent safety and tolerability profile and has a over 95% efficacy in acute visceral leishmaniasis. And also the drug is cheaper compared to the antimonials. Although there are the limitations which are associated with it, this is at the pain at the injection site and the cases of reversible otoxicity and nephrotoxicity. And to the liposomal amphotericin B, this drug kills the parasite through metabolic shock induction and the destruction of the cell membrane through the formation of pores. The drug has 97% efficacy in India. And then the limitations include mild rigors and chills, high fever, disease relapses, and the need for hospitalization. Next slide, please. Miltefosine. This is the only oral drug which has been developed for the treatment of cutaneous leishmaniasis. It's caused by the trade name of Impavido. It kills the parasite through interference of the parasite mitochondria. The oral dosages are as indicated. And then the advantages it has, studies have demonstrated that of more than 60% efficacy rates in African countries. However, there are cases of adverse effects associated with its use. That is, they are rare vomiting, it is teratogenic, and also the issues of drug resistance in India and Bilha reduces its use. Pentamidine, on the other hand, is not used in Kenya. However, it is the first-line drug treatment of mucocutaneous leishmaniasis in Brazil and Guyana. The drug has a efficacy variability within different regions, ranging from 35 to 96%. Combination treatment of pentamidine with the ARVs reduces the risks for relapses in visceral leishmaniasis and in HIV infection. However, there are the limitation associated with it, which is the issue of diabetes mellitus, hypotension, drug resistance, and headaches. Next slide, please. Currently,
not time. Time is not on your side.
Okay, currently there are no human vaccines, no leishmaniasis vaccines which are currently available. However, these are some of the available, the listed list of vaccines are those which are under development. Next slide, please. The KEMRI and the DNDi organization play a key role in the diagnosis and coming up with the diagnosis and treatment for leishmaniasis. For example, Dr. Wasuna, who is the director of D&I, have key interest in the clinical trials of visceral leishmaniasis. She has done a lot of work, and some of her works are highlighted as indicated. Currently, there is an ongoing phase 3 clinical drug efficacy trial on SST and PM comparing PML miltefosine for acute visceral leishmaniasis treatment. Next slide, please. Onto the conclusion recommendation, we found that chemotherapy is the mainstay for the leishmaniasis control and management. However, due to the limitation associated with this drug, there is need to develop newer drugs with less toxicity and oral drugs. Also, there is need for the further clinical trials and specific management intervention for clinical cutaneous leishmaniasis cases is needed. Also, there is need for strengthening of disease surveillance system is warranted in the afflicted counties.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. We have exhausted our time allocated. Let's please listen to the next one. Is Jay Koech in? Is Jay Koech in? Meanwhile, note the chat. There are questions being sent in the chat. There's a PDF that has been submitted there. We want to hear about children under 5 years, Marsabit County. Is Jay Koech in? Is Jay Koech in? Jay Koech? Okay, then we move to the next one. Tarum, factors influencing consumption of sun-dried vegetables. This coincides with, it's about lunchtime. Is Tarum in? Tarum, are you in? Please confirm.
Yes, I'm in.
Okay,
yes, Prof, I'm in.
Yes, please help us keep to 9-10 minutes maximum. The floor is yours. Thank you.
All right.
Go ahead, Regina.
I cannot share my screen.
We are doing it for you. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you. My name is Annie Titaru from Masinde Muliro University. I'm presenting on attitude and consumption practices of sun-dried vegetables among households in Teso South Sub-County. Busia County, and concerning the background, micronutrient deficiencies still remain to be a global health problem, affecting at least 2 billion people worldwide. And the most common micronutrient deficiencies that are prevalent are iron,
Kitaro, we seem to have lost you. Sorry. Are you still with us?
Oops, my network decided to fail me. I'm sorry.
Yes, sorry, yeah.
Yeah, so among school-age children, the most prevalent form of micronutrient deficiency is zinc deficiency. Next slide, please. And it also affects it also affects both pregnant and non-pregnant women, as shown by the statistics. And according to the Busia County National Nutrition Action Plan of 2019, it was also found out that zinc, iron, and vitamin A deficiencies are widespread in the county, with 41.6% of women of reproductive age being affected by anemia. And there are so many causes of micronutrient deficiencies, amongst them being poor quality of food, lack of dietary diversity, high infection rates, among others. Next. And vegetables form part of the micronutrient-rich foods that are promoted for purposes of reducing micronutrient deficiencies. However, their consumption is still low globally as relative to the recommendation of the WHO, which is 200 to 250 grams per person per day. And the low consumption of vegetables are linked to several factors. And it is majorly experienced during the dry season when vegetables are scarce and less affordable. Next. So this study is a follow-up of a previous work carried out within the Education and Training for Sustainable Agriculture and Nutrition in East Africa, abbreviated as Egerton. And this project is undertaken in Teso South Sub-County in Kenya and Kapchorwa District in Uganda. And the sun drying of vegetables using the protected sun dryers was one of the simple innovations introduced during the trials of improved practices, abbreviated as TIPS, in order to enable households preserve surplus vegetables that can be used during lean seasons. Next. Problem statement. Due to scarcity as well as hiked prices of vegetables during the dry season, most households in Teso South Sub-County subsist on starch-based diets. And vegetables are usually included in one meal, contributing to consumption of poor quality diets. Consumption of sun-dried vegetables during the dry season could go a long way in improving dietary nutrient intake and consequently reduce micronutrient deficiencies in resource limited households. Next. Next slide, please.
Annette, you're still with us? Keep speaking. Annette, if you're with us, we are following your objectives. Annette, are you still with us? Annette, what we're going to do is let's invite somebody else. Meanwhile, as you try to sort out your connection issues, let's invite somebody else. Sorry, then we'll give you a chance towards the end. So I would like to find out, is Lesuda, are you in? Lesuda, are you in and ready? Maybe you can take this slot. Yeah, let's take this slot so that we proceed as Annette tries to find herself back and get herself back to rhythm. So Lesuda, again, it is now 12:17. We'll give you again 10 minutes. Please go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you for the invitation, Prof. This is a paper we published. The authors are Lesuda. I am the MSc student at Egerton University. Professor Mesha Kobonyo, a lecturer from biochemistry. Dr. Prince Serek, lecturer from Department of Human Nutrition. And we assess the determinants of knowledge about aflatoxin and fumonisin contamination in sorghum and post-harvest practices among caregivers of young children in Kerio Valley. Next slide, please. So as a part of introduction, in most cases, a salt region or arid and semi-arid lands experience food and nutrition insecurities. So as one of the interventions by the government, they promoted drought-tolerant crops in cooperation or in collaboration with other developmental actors like ICRISAT or the Accelerated Value Chain Development Project. So the same project was done in Elgeyo-Marakwet County, specifically Kerio Valley. This was to address the malnutrition rates among young children under 5 years. But despite the interventions, including the promotion of insect-enriched forage by the World Division, the undernutrition rates in Kerio Valley were still high. That is, in 2019, the stunting rate was 67%, underweight 27%, and wasting was 9%. So studies have shown that contamination of complementary foods by the aflatoxin and other toxins leads to undernutrition. So we speculated that this food that the government and other partners have promoted in the region could be contaminated by aflatoxin. That's why we carried out this study in Kerio Valley. Next slide, please. So evidence from the counties around the Elgeyo-Marakwet have shown that aflatoxin and fumonisin contaminate sorghum in levels above the regulatory limits by the Kenyan government. And according to WHO, the occurrence of the two toxins in complementary foods act together in causing stunting. This is when compared to consuming foods contaminated by aflatoxin alone, the combination of the two is more severe than one toxin present in the food. So studies also have shown that poor mycotoxin knowledge is likely to lead to poor post-harvest practices. And that's why we intended to assess the knowledge of the caregivers versus how they practice or store sorghum after harvest. Next slide, please. So the study was undertaken in 3 wards in Kerio Valley, that is Emso, Endo, and Aror wards. This is basically because the 3 wards were the main areas of target for the promotion of drought-tolerant crops, including sorghum. And the study that was done in Kerio Valley was done in these 3 wards, where the stunting rate was found to be 67%. So when we were doing our study, we targeted sorghum growing farmers, especially those who have children 6 to 59 months. So sampling procedure, Kerio Valley was purposely selected, having the high rates of undernutrition in Elgeyo-Marakwet County and being the area where the drought-tolerant crops were majorly promoted. And so we selected the villages where the drought-tolerant crops were promoted, and using the probability proportion to size, population size, 30 villages were selected, and from the 30 villages, simple random sampling was used to select 353 households. We also collected data using key informant interviews and focus group discussions. For the key informant interviews, we focused on the lead farmers, community health volunteers, the chairmen of aggregation centers, in those areas, they have aggregation centers where they harvest their commodity and put in one warehouse for selling purposes. We also did some focus group discussion with the caregivers of young children. So next slide, please. So as a result of the study, we found that we assessed the aflatoxin and fumonisin levels, and we asked 12 questions, and we scored the question. If the caregiver got the right answer, we give 1 mark. For wrong answer or don't know, we give 0 mark. So for the overall, the mean score for the knowledge for the 353 participants, it was 6.8%, which was very low. The pass mark was scoring 60%, which is 7 score. So 6 is below 7. That's why it's poor knowledge score. And for 353 caregivers, almost 62% had poor knowledge about mycotoxins. So we asked them the causes of mycotoxins, if they have heard about aflatoxin, fumonisin, or mycotoxins. And according to the question we asked, 62% of them don't know anything about mycotoxin. So for the caregivers that we interviewed, 61% heard about aflatoxin, and only 25 and 19% were familiar with the term fumonisins and mycotoxins. So when we asked them, we asked, next slide, not just this slide, go back again. So for the caregivers, we asked them if they know sorghum is likely to be affected by the toxins, and 13% said they don't know if sorghum can be contaminated by aflatoxin, and that 3% don't know that sorghum can be affected by fumonisin. So from the graph on the left side, we can see the knowledge scores and the practice score, where we will see in the next slide. Next slide, please. So for post-harvest practices, we had 18 questions, and the mean score for the study participant was 9, which is below 10. Which is called the 60%. So in this case, the post-harvest practices were poor, and more than 3/4 of the caregivers dry sorghum on bare grounds. And we know soil is the main source of aflatoxin or fumonisin. So when you try your products on the ground, they are more likely to get in touch with the spores or the fungus that causes the aflatoxin or fumonisin. So as a measure to certain the dryness of the grains, none of the caregivers use the meter moisture to measure the moisture content of the grain, but rather they use the traditional ways, which is biting, looking, and touching or squeezing. And these methods are not accurate to certain that the grains are sufficient dry before storage. And also 96% of the caregivers use manual shelling methods to shell the grains. And these methods are also likely to contribute to aflatoxin or fumonisin contamination because of the breakage of the grains. So it exposes the grains to contamination. So we asked the caregivers how they use the spoiled grains. So only 32% of them throw the grains away. 52% used to feed the animals. So for those who used to feed the animals, it means that these toxins are likely to come back to their food because of the milk or animals' food, animal source foods. So they are likely to get contaminated, like eggs or other ways. Also, 13% of them used to brew the alcohol, and we found that the studies have shown that the brewed alcohol from the contaminated grains, they are likely also to contain the aflatoxin or fumonisin. Also, 5% of the next, just remember the last slide, please. Previous slide. So we saw that 5% of the caregivers mentioned that they use spoiled grain as human food. This is because of the food shortage, and some of them, they don't know aware that aflatoxin or fumonisin can cause any health effects on them. So the table below showed the practices score, where we see 75 of them have poor knowledge about the aflatoxin. Next slide. So we did some association between the social demographic factors and the knowledge about the aflatoxin or mycotoxin. Yeah? So we saw that caregivers who are who are 30 years and above, they are more likely to know about aflatoxin. And this may be because of the experience they gain as they do farming, or also from news from the previous occurrence of the aflatoxin, especially in northeastern. Some of them might have heard from such occurrences. Level of education also was found to be significant, and we found that those caregivers who did not go to school, they are more likely to know about aflatoxin than those who went to school. And this may be related to less in most subjects, or let me say more subjects in high school, primary, or university. They don't majorly do the courses on aflatoxin or education on aflatoxin. Also, studies have shown that in our study, we found that many or a certain percent of caregivers went to school, but very less or little of them got the information about aflatoxin from reading. Maybe because of lack of motivation from farmers, or the modules for aflatoxins or mycotoxins are technical for them to understand. Also, marital status was found to be significant or influence the knowledge. This is maybe for those who are married and staying together, the source of information is two-way, unlikely to those who are not married or staying in single. They only depend on for themselves to know about aflatoxin, but those who are married, maybe a husband or wife, bring information about the aflatoxin or other. Monthly income also shown to influence knowledge of caregivers. We found that those caregivers who are earning 5,000 per month, more than 5,000 per month, are more likely to know about aflatoxin. This is maybe they have sources of information like radio or TV, unlike those who are earning less than 5 months. So for those who are earning less than 5,000, maybe they are not willing to spend money on non-food items like radio or even so that they can get the information. Next slide.
Meanwhile, Lasida, please note you are out of time. You are 12 minutes.
Okay. So next slide on the practices, please. Previous slide. Previous. So we also did the association. No, next slide.
So that conclude, please.
Yeah. So we also saw that age, education level, and monthly income also mycotoxin knowledge influence the practices of caregivers in one way or another, but the marital status does not affect the post-harvest practices. Next slide. So in conclusion, we found that caregivers had poor knowledge about mycotoxins and their health effects, and this is point of concern. So because this knowledge affects how the caregivers store or handle their sorghum after harvest. So recommendation, we need to sensitize farmers about mycotoxins contaminations and their health effects, and also include some aspects of dietary diversity so that they can include diverse diets that can reduce the chances of eating contaminated food. And also we can also use processing methods such as fermentation. It has been shown to reduce the aflatoxin or fumonisin levels in foods. Next slide. So this study was, so this study was funded by NRF. Thank you.
Thank you, Lasuda. Thank you very much. You've taken 13 minutes, so we still have a minute to take your questions. And what I want to do, just like we did with the other one, is to combine your questions in the next cohort. So members, we want to hear something related to food again, vegetable, eating a different vegetable in a week. This is Dr. Waswa. Dr. Waswa is coming in to tell us. Dr. Waswa, please, the floor is yours. Again, help us do 10 minutes. Thank you. Dr. Waswa, are you there? No, Dr. Waswa, not yet. Not hearing you. Dr. Waswa, are you there? Meanwhile, Lesuda told us something very important, that being married is likely to help it's likely to make somebody hear about aflatoxins more than if they were single. I don't know if that's what your study results were saying. As we wait for Dr. Waswa to join, Lesuda, is that true? The ones who are married were more likely to hear. Is it just because they have 4 years together? Or a person, 4 years are better than 2 years? Lesuda?
Yeah, it could be. It could be the source of information is.
Or the spouses teach them.
Yes.
So 4 years are better than 2, Lesuda, as far as aflatoxin management is concerned.
Yes, that is true.
Okay, thank you. Lesuda, please notice you have so many questions in the chat there. You have many questions in the chat. And same, I'm seeing Dr. Nyamoya. You have many questions. This one, somebody could ask you what you presented. Is it theory, or do you have models that can predict predictive modeling? I'm seeing a hand. Meanwhile, we are waiting to get Dr. Waswa. She's in the room. I think hers was muted. I can see Blessing Adelabu. You raised a hand. Maybe just a few seconds.
Okay, thank you so much. I am from Nigeria. I'm enjoying this conference. Thank you so much. Please, about aflatoxin. Please, can you hear me?
Yes, Blessing, go ahead.
Okay.
Meanwhile, just a minute.
Okay, and the presenter did not mention what produces the aflatoxin. Aflatoxin is not the one infecting or contaminating the crops. No. There are microorganisms that infect those crops, and these microorganisms are the one producing the aflatoxins. And the presenter has been mentioning mycotoxin, aflatoxin, fumonisin. There are differences between all these. Aflatoxin and fumonisin are all mycotoxins because they are produced from fungi. So the presenter has to educate the farmers more about what aflatoxins are and what produces the aflatoxin. And please note, very important, the aflatoxin is not the one contaminating the crop, but the microorganisms. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Blessing. Lesuda would be blessed by those comments. Please feel free to use the chat as well. Feel free to use the chat. I can see Lydia is on. Lydia, Dr. Waswa, are you ready? Are you ready? We are also pressed for time. There's still another 2 presenters. Dr. Waswa, if you're ready, I'd like you to go ahead. Please help us again, make use of time. Thank you. Dr. Waswa, I can't hear you. Dr. Waswa. Meanwhile, the question that Dr. Lesuda was being reminded, Lesuda, please, there's something to do with the terminology used right there. The terminology use, you were being reminded about your terminology use. Thank you, Blessing. Lesuda, hope you noted that. I'm looking for Dr. Waswa. I'm looking for Dr. Waswa. I saw her joining, and maybe it's a technical glitch. Let's get a comment from Lesuda. What you're being told about your terminology. Let's hear from you.
So thank you for the response for the question. So for the terminologies, we know that when fungi or fungi species, we have different type of fungi species. So we have those ones that produce aflatoxin, we have those ones that produce fumonisin. So once the food is contaminated by these molds or fungi, we don't know which mold produce aflatoxin or fumonisin by using our eyes. Unless we do some analysis, laboratory analysis, that's when we quantify that this specific fungi or mold produce aflatoxin or fumonisin. So fumonisin and aflatoxin are just the poisons produced by fungi when they colonize or contaminate food material. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, members, note the chat. There were many of them. I'll go back. I can see there's an engagement between Dr. Nyamweya and Professor Biambo. Prof is being asked, did you do, or rather Dr. Nyamweya is being asked, for your presentation, what is the basis? Is it data of probably analysis from the lab? Nyamweya, please clarify this one. And then as we try to get Dr. Waswa in 1 minute, please.
I have clarified in one of the charts. It's
okay.
A review from several papers.
Okay.
So, I just truncated the references to reduce the number of slides.
Okay, so what you're
but
presenting—
they are available for anyone who needs.
So what you're presenting is a review, right? Okay, I'm seeing another one here. Lesuda, you're being asked a question. When you said caregivers, sorry, my screen has just acted up a little bit. Lesuda, are you able to see that question on caregivers? Yes, I have it here. You're being asked, what is the relationship? What is the relationship between caregivers of young children? What is the relationship with the study objectives? Could you clarify that, Lesuda, briefly?
So, sorry, we focused on the caregivers of young children because we wanted to know if the aflatoxin or fumonisin contamination is their concern when preparing complementary foods for young children. So because once they have the concern, they know they are likely to handle foods or ingredients for preparing young children foods in a different way. So for them, when we are assessing their concern, most of them say that aflatoxin or fumonisin is not part of your concern when preparing food for young children, and that's a concern already. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Lesuda. So you are working with caregivers of young children to know whether they are concerned about it.
Yes.
There's a question here you're being asked. Meanwhile, Dr. Waswa, I can see your slides. Do you have audio with you?
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Members, let's pause briefly. There's a question about an level of education and aflatoxin between those who went to school and those who didn't. Lesuda, you'll respond to that one afterwards in the plenary. But let's listen to Dr. Waswa. Sorry about your technical hitches. I hope you can take 8 minutes now. Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon. My name is Lydia Waswa from Department of Human Nutrition, and I'll briefly share with you results from a study which was part of the education and training for sustainable agriculture and nutrition in East Africa. And this study, the topic was eat a different vegetable each day in a week, facilitating and hindering factors among smallholder farm households in Teso South Sub-County, that is in Kenya, and Kapchorwa district in Uganda. This study is a collaboration between institutions in Germany and Makerere and Egerton. So the overall objective of the Egerton project was to identify and promote improved farming practices for healthier soils and diversified production, to improve access to value chain actors, to inputs and services, and to enhance consumer food culture and diversified nutrition. So the results I'm going to share fall within this objective of enhancing consumer food culture and diversified nutrition. So as a way of background, consumption of unhealthy and poor quality diets, low in nutrient-rich foods, including animal source foods, fruits and vegetables remain a challenge, particularly in the rural and resource-poor settings in developing countries. And vegetables and also fruits are a rich source of micronutrients and other important bioactive plant components which are beneficial to health. And therefore, WHO has taken this seriously and recommends consumption of at least 400 grams, that is 5 portions of fruits and vegetables per day. However, in Kenya, only about 5.2% of adults aged 18 to 69 years consume these recommended servings of fruits and vegetables. And on average, we are told Kenyans consume about 2.4, or consume fruits approximately 2.4 days in a week. And vegetables, they are consumed at least 5 days in a week. However, the types of vegetables consumed is very little, depending on the season and the background of the people. And therefore, this consumption of poor quality diets is one of the factors that has been highlighted to contribute to the burden of malnutrition, including both undernutrition and micronutrient deficiencies, and also the increased risk of non-communicable diseases, which is also evident in Kenya. And therefore, as a background to this study, we did a baseline survey in the study area, and it showed a high prevalence of malnutrition in children under the age of 2 years. And also from the baseline results, the quality of diets consumed among the households in the study area was found to be low. As you can see, stunting rates were 16% in Kapchorwa and 18% in Teso South. With regard to the quality of diets consumed, looking at women, they're supposed to consume foods from at least 10 food groups. And any woman consuming at least 5 out of these 10 is considered to have achieved the minimum dietary diversity for women. And therefore, they are likely to achieve their micronutrient requirements. And therefore, the results show that in both study sites in Kenya and Uganda, 59% of the women were able to achieve this, and 41% were not able to achieve. We also looked at men using the same 10 food groups, and only 44% in Kapchorwa and 51% in Kenya were able to achieve this recommendation. Looking at children, for the children, the recommendation is to consume foods from at least 7 food groups, which have been defined by WHO, and any child who consumes at least 4 and above is considered to have achieved the minimum dietary diversity, and therefore they are able to at least get the minimum micronutrient intake in their diet. And looking at the results from the baseline showed that 36% in Kapchorwa and 41% in Teso were able to achieve this recommendation. And therefore, based on these baseline results, one of the food groups which was a challenge in terms of consumption was vegetables. And therefore, we asked ourselves, is it possible to enhance vegetable consumption among smallholder farm households? And if so, what are the facilitating and hindering factors? Because to achieve this, you must understand what are the factors driving and hindering. And therefore, we also ask ourselves, because people know the importance of vegetables, how should we frame messages to induce a sustainable behavior change among these households? So as I mentioned earlier, the study was done in 2 rural settings, in Kapchorwa, Uganda, near the Mount Elgon area, and in Teso South, near the Busia-Uganda border in Kenya. And you can see they're all rural settings. And to collect data, we used the trials for improved practices. And this is a kind of formative research where program planners try out some feasible practices or behaviors on a small scale before you are able to implement it on large scale. And therefore, this is just a small introduction to how it is done. So you have 2 rounds. We had 2 rounds of the trials for improved practices. One round was between February and June, and the other one between July and October. And we targeted households in these 2 study sites, a small number. You can see it is 48 at the end of one of the trials between August and October. And during each round, we have 3 household visits. You have one visit where you go and assess the current dietary practices. Now, in this case, we are finding out what are the practices in these households with regard to consumption of vegetables. And then based on what you get from that, you counsel the household member, basically the one who prepares food, etc., on what they can do to improve the consumption of vegetables. For example, we targeted to diversify vegetable consumption, where we wanted to negotiate with the household to consume a variety of vegetables. What you see in Kenya and many places, we tend to only consume a limited number. Like for now, it is dry. You'll find many households just relying on cabbage because it is there. But our aim is we want to make households consume different kinds of vegetables throughout the week, throughout the seasons, etc. So the first visit is just assessing the current practices, and then you counsel on which practice can be used to improve the uptake of these vegetables. And then you negotiate with the household or with the caregiver or the woman in the household, what can you try? And then you allow them time to try out this practice. And then after that, you come for a next visit. During the next visit, you ask the respondent to report about the experiences during the trials, and then you do further assessment and counseling, and then further negotiation. And then you allow again for them to try, and then come for another round again and do the same. And then at the end, we had evaluation workshops where we had participatory cooking demonstrations and sharing of experiences. And then from the responses which were captured from the data collection during the tips, they were analyzed by performing qualitative structured content analysis using QDA software. And then the data was triangulated with also the quantitative data. And also we had some FGD data earlier. So overall, because of time, I'll just shorten. We were looking at the implementation rates of the key recommendations. In total, 20 different topics were tested between February and October 2019. And 3 of these recommendations, which you wanted to see, are they feasible? 3 of them were based on improving data diversity with a focus, with one of them focusing on improving vegetable consumption. So the question was, or the recommendation was, eat a different vegetable every day for 7 days. And here we're trying to recommend to the household, try eating a different vegetable every day. Today, cabbage, tomorrow, kunde, the following day, mito, etc. And when you look at from the results, the implementation rate, 65% of households in Kapchorwa were able to uptake this recommendation, while in Teso we had 82% of the households. And therefore, we are trying to find out what were the hindering and facilitating factors. And these are from the quotes which were given by the respondents during the counseling sessions within the TIPS process. For example, in this case, in terms of hindering factors, participants from Uganda said vegetables that are bought are expensive. So this is one hindering factor to them consuming different types of vegetables. Another participant from Kenya responded, due to the prolonged drought, the vegetables they had planted got finished and the remaining ones dried up. So you can see an issue here of seasonality or lack of availability of vegetables in terms of hindering the consumption of different types of vegetables throughout the week. On the other hand, during the tips, we also had those who gave some factors which were facilitating them to consume a variety of vegetables. A participant from Kenya said there was a willingness, she had a willingness to try and see how other family members would respond since they are not used to it. So this is a case where we recommended trying a different vegetable. So the willingness to try was a motivating factor to consume different types of vegetables. Another one responded from Uganda. Different vegetables give appetite to eat other foods. So this was willingness. If you consume different vegetables, they make you maybe want to eat other foods instead of just using one kind of vegetable. Another one whose feedback was indicative of facilitating factor reported, eating different vegetable varieties keeps the appetite for eating them again. So this was indicative to us in terms of what factors could facilitate consumption of different vegetables during every day and across season. So when you look at this, if you are to implement a larger project, you would have to think in terms of what solutions would you have to address these hindering factors. And one of the solutions which then you can have to input in your design of your intervention was maybe you need to look at drying or preserving vegetables when they're in plenty or when they're in season, such that they will not be expensive or there'll be no issue of buying when they're not in season. And what was observed in terms of impact, there was, and in terms of what was observed, there was increased appetite and vegetable portion sizes when we took the participants through sun drying, and then they were able to try out these recipes in the workshop. So there was increased even appetite for these sun-dried vegetables, which for many, they did not appreciate before. And also the portion sizes. You know, in many cases, when you look at our plates, in terms of how much vegetable we have vis-a-vis the staple, we only have a small amount of vegetable and a big amount of garlic. So through the tips and the feasible practices, there was observation that there was increased appreciation of vegetables and also increased portion sizes that were served. Further, other hindering factors, okay, limited variety of vegetables grown or accessible due to lack of seeds to plant. This was a hindering factor. And then another respondent said the father dislikes sukuma wiki because it causes him to vomit. On the other hand, a factor which was promoting was the ability for the people to mix different kinds of vegetables with different characteristics in terms of bitterness and toughness. And therefore, they were able to add something and make it better, and that enhanced consumption. So solutions to this would be maybe promoting the use of mixed dishes, improving seed availability. And when you're implementing a project, you try to consider the gender perspective, because we understand from what we did that if husbands do not like a particular vegetable, then chances are the whole household may not prepare that meal at all or that vegetable at all. So in conclusion, and with regard to recommendation, from the overall study, the knowledge about health benefits of vegetables was present. However, portion sizes served were very small, and the variety of vegetable consumed was very limited, with some vegetables even being viewed as a poor man's food. And therefore, the tips help to increase diversification of vegetable consumption. And the main challenges, as we have seen, was seasonality, financial constraints, and willingness to change behavior because of preference of family members and unfavorable experiences, maybe from the vegetable, and inadequate knowledge on vegetable production and processing practices. And therefore, in order to plan successful interventions to enhance vegetable consumption, we recommend agronomic trials and other interventions that would enhance vegetable availability through production throughout the year, maybe, for example, through horticulture extension, and then promoting vegetable processing process, for example, sun drying of vegetables, even at a local level, and then promoting sustainable dietary behavior changes, for example, through participatory nutrition education sessions, and also making it practical through participatory cooking trials with the innovative recipes, and also allowing the participants to try out new recipes. So with that, thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Lydia. So we're taking 14 minutes. Members, let's jump on to the next one immediately. I'm wondering if Annette, are you now ready? Are you now ready? Meanwhile, the chat group is very active. I can see a whole paragraph. Thank you. Keep them coming. Annette, are you now ready?
Yes, I'm ready, sir.
Please, let's try and cut time. Remember, you had started up to some points. Let's start. Thank you, Lydia, for your presentation. Annette, please go ahead.
Okay. Is my screen being shared from your end? Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we are with you, Annette. Please go ahead.
Okay, so my name is Annette, and I'm presenting on attitude and consumption practices of sun-dried vegetables among households in Teso South Sub-County, Kenya. So regarding the background, micronutrient deficiencies still remain to be a major global health problem, affecting at least more than 2 billion people worldwide. with vitamin A, iron, and zinc deficiencies being the most prevalent, the most profound deficiencies of micronutrients in sub-Saharan Africa. And the statistics are 40%, 15 to 20%, and 15 to 50% respectively for the aforementioned micronutrient deficiencies. And in Kenya, we also have micronutrient deficiencies affecting majorly preschool children, school-age children, as shown by the statistics, and also affecting both pregnant and non-pregnant women. And according to the Busia County Nutrition Action Plan of 2019, it was found out that the micronutrient deficiencies of zinc, iron, and vitamin A deficiencies are also widespread in Busia County, with at least 41.6% of women of reproductive age being anemic. And there are a number of causes of micronutrient deficiencies, just to mention a few: poor quality of food, lack of dietary diversity, and high infection rates. Vegetables form part of the micronutrient-rich foods promoted for consumption in order to reduce micronutrient deficiencies in the community. However, their consumption is still low as recommended to the WHO recommendations, which is 200 to 250 grams per person per day. And in Kenya, the consumption rates are 200 grams per person per day. And low consumption of vegetables is linked to several factors and is experienced more during the dry season when vegetables are scarce and also less affordable, considering that during the dry season, their prices really go a notch higher, making them less affordable to the resource-poor households. Therefore, this study is a follow-up of the previous work carried out within the Education and Training for Sustainable Agriculture and Nutrition in East Africa project, just as it has been presented by the previous presenter, Dr. Waswa. This is part of the follow-up of some of the activities that were undertaken within the project. And sun-drying of vegetables using protected sun dryers was one of the simple innovations introduced during the trials of improved practices in order to help households preserve surplus vegetables that can be used during the lean seasons. And problem statement: due to the scarcity as well as the hiked prices of vegetables during the dry season, most households in Teso South normally subsist on starch-based diets. And the vegetables are usually included in one meal, for example, supper, or not included at all, contributing to consumption of poor quality diets. Also, consumption of sun-dried vegetables during the dry season could go a long way in improving nutrient intake and consequently reducing the burden of micronutrient deficiencies in resource-limited households. And the general objective of this study was to assess the attitude and consumption practices of sun-dried vegetables among households in Teso South Sub-County. And the specific objectives were to determine the socioeconomic and demographic characteristics of the households, to assess the consumption patterns of sun-dried vegetables among the households, to determine factors influencing consumption of sun-dried vegetables among the households, and lastly, to assess the perception and attitudes of the participants with regard to sun-dried vegetables. And the objectives lead to the research questions, which are: what are the socioeconomic and demographic characteristics of households in Teso South Sub-County? What are the consumption patterns of the sun-dried vegetables? What factors influence the consumption patterns of sun-dried vegetables? And lastly, what are the perceptions and attitude towards sun-dried vegetables among the households? So that is the conceptual framework that was employed by the study, with the dependent variable being consumption of sun-dried vegetables, as well as the consumption of sun-dried vegetables. And then we had the intervening variable, which was sun-drying practices that were implemented, or rather that were tried out during the trials of improved practices. And then we have the independent variables on the lower end. And in terms of methodology, this study was undertaken in Teso South Sub-County, Kenya,
as mentioned earlier, it is a study that was undertaken as a follow-up of the Egerton research activity that entailed sun drying of vegetables. It was a descriptive cross-sectional study that involved participants that took place, or rather took part in the trials of improved practices, as well as those in the villages in close proximity to those that undertook the trials of improved practices. So I decided to include both the beneficiary and non-beneficiaries of the TIPS practices for purposes of comparison. And data was collected using interviews, as well as focus group discussions, which involved, for interviews, it involved all participants, but for focus group discussions, we only sampled 4 villages that took part in the TIPS and 4 villages that didn't take part in TIPS. Data was analyzed using SPSS, that is quantitative data, while qualitative data was analyzed thematically. The sample size was determined using the formula by Yamen, 1967, and the total sample size was 100, but for purposes of accounting for attrition, 10% of the calculated sample size was added, summing up to 110. For the sampling procedure, purposive sampling was used for selecting Busia County, Teso South Sub-County, and of course the 4 out of the 6 wards that undertook, that participated in this study, based on the fact that the Egerton project was undertaken in this region. And then census sampling was used to select the 8 TIPS villages, as well as the 50 households that participated in the trials of improved practices, while systematic sampling was used to select the 8 non-TIPS villages, as well as the 50 households that did participate in the study. And results, the socioeconomic and demographic profile of the participants indicated that out of the expected number of participants, we're able to collect data for 104 participants, at least 50 from the TIPS villages, and 54 from the non-TIPS villages, indicating a 95% response rate. 98% of the participants were female, and the ages of participants ranged from 20 to 79 years, with 35.7 being the mean age. And males were reported to be the heads for most of the households, that is 87.5%. And the main source of occupation for more than half of the participants was farming. The level of education generally was low, with more than half, that is 52.9% of the participants, not having completed primary education. Regarding consumption patterns of sun-dried vegetables, it was observed that consumption of sun-dried vegetables was more profound among households that did participate in the trials of improved practices that involved sun-drying of vegetables. As shown in the statistics in the table below, you can see that throughout the quarters of 2020, only 2% did consume sun-dried vegetables from the non-TIPS participants, whereas among the TIPS participants, we had substantially higher percentages relative to the non-TIPS participants. And the most preferred sun-dried vegetables included cowpea leaves, jute mallow, and amaranth, as shown by the percentages, while the most disliked were kales, cabbages, and spider plant. Findings of this study differed from the results of a study conducted in Nigeria by Okaye, which indicated that the most sun-dried vegetables in the regions were tomatoes, okra, and baobab leaves, probably due to the different cultures in terms of food production and consumption. Also, findings of this study were similar to the results of a study by Egerton, which was conducted in Dodoma, that reported that the most preferred sun-dried vegetables were cowpea leaves, jute mallow, and cleomhita. Regarding the consumption frequency, as you can see, it was relatively low, with the most frequency being every month throughout the quarters of the year. These findings are contrary to what Okello et al. In rural Tanzania, which showed that sun-dried vegetables are consumed 1 to 2 times a week and 3 to the study variables such as the socio-demographic and economic characteristics,
Annette, please conclude.
as well as
please conclude.
As well as the as well as the perception, or rather the attitude of vegetable consumption. And as indicated, those that have a p-value of less than 0.05 were shown to be associated to the consumption patterns of sun-dried vegetables. So also regarding the fact, the emerging factors that came up from the FGDs, found out that this consumption of sun-dried vegetables were also influenced by crop preference, availability of other coping strategies, such as buying vegetables from the market and consuming substitutes, as well as the sensory attributes, including color, smell, and taste. Yeah, these findings are similar to, they differed with the results of a study by Ochieng, which showed that sex of the household influenced consumption of sun-dried vegetables. Also, Egerton showed that education influenced consumption of sun-dried vegetables. However, they were similar to Okayo et al., which showed that awareness of sun-dried vegetables played a significant role in influencing the consumption of sun-dried vegetables in Nigeria. And concerning perception and attitude.
Conclusion, please, Annette. We are out of time.
Okay. Regarding attitude, we found out that among the TIPS participants, at least 87% had a positive attitude towards sun-dried vegetables, while among the non-TIPS participants, 62% had a positive attitude towards sun-dried vegetables. So, and one of the things that came out about the attitudes and perception regarding sun-dried vegetables from the FGDs were awareness of sun-drying vegetables, sensory attributes, and gender roles really played a significant factor in influencing the perception and attitudes. In conclusion, this study reports that consumption of sun-dried vegetables was relatively low in Teso South Sub-County. However, it was the consumption was more profound among the households that did participate in TIPS activities involving sun-drying of vegetables. And also, generally, the participants' perception and attitude towards sun-dried vegetables was positive, as indicated by the percentages, implying that the consumption of sun-dried vegetables in the area can be enhanced if more awareness about the same is created. Thank you.
Okay. Finally, thank you, Annette, for your presentation. Members, I take this is the very last presentation, so I'd like to open up. Again, we have just a few minutes before the next sessions begin, and there'll be a break. Annette, thank you for your presentation. I'll start with around, let's take maybe 10 minutes of interaction, then we see. We've had Waswa, we've had Annette, then we have Lesuda, then we've had the chief questions. They still keep coming. They keep coming 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people who make presentations. Annette, your study is showing that there's a change in taste, and could that be a factor determining consumption of these vegetables or not? And how do you overcome it moving forward? Thank you. Very briefly, let's have, I could see some questions in the chat. Okay, I'll take this one here. What's the explanation of super immunity? What's the explanation of super immunity? What's the explanation of super immunity? And I'm seeing Dr. Minamwea writing there. Okay. And then another question is...
I have already answered that in the chat.
Yes, that is answered. And then I'm seeing something about available data indicates the benefits of getting vaccine outweigh risk for people who are pregnant or might become pregnant. Okay, that's a response. In the presentation, it's mentioned as a review, or that's the question that you actually reviewed literature as to, and then made your presentation. As we look at the questions in the chat, Annette, what do you have to say? Maybe respond briefly, and then we get to hear from Annette.
Okay, you've asked about test. This is one of the sensory attributes that really came out strongly during both interviews and also focus group discussions. So yes, it is one of the attributes that really influences consumption of sun-dried vegetables in the region. And based on the findings, this may be as a way of maybe encouraging consumption of sun-dried vegetables in the area. There's need to create more awareness regarding sun-dried vegetables. That is in terms of not only sun-drying, but also preparation. They could not be, maybe they do disregard the taste because of incorrect ways of cooking the vegetables. So if proper sensitization, or rather if we create proper awareness concerning sun-drying vegetables and also consumption as well as preparation methods, there's a possibility that the aspect of taste can be enhanced and therefore influence the acceptability of the entire practice. Thank you.
Thank you. We give ourselves 10 minutes to interact. I'm seeing a hand up, and so keep your responses very, very brief and your questions very concise. Dr. Shemuya, your hand is up.
Yes, I'm asking Annette to respond to this allegation that sun drying kind of depletes the nutrients in the vegetable due to exposure to UV rays of the sun.
Okay, thank you.
Can she respond?
Nice one, Annette. That's
yes,
a question directed to you. Very briefly,
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, such allegations are there. We've also encountered that in the village. However, we were really emphasizing on the appropriate ways, like following the right procedure. One of the things that also results to depletion, or rather declining of nutrient levels in sun-drying of vegetables, is not following the right procedure when it comes to sun-drying. However, we emphasize, or rather we encourage people to follow the right channels and use protected sun dryers. When you use a protected sun dryer, the exposure to sunlight is very minimal, and therefore you're able to preserve most of the nutrients. And also, while before sun drying, the blanching process also really helps in preserving most of those nutrients.
Okay, thank you. So there is a preservation of nutrients. It's another question to Lesuda, very, very interesting one, that going to school is harmful as far as your knowledge of aflatoxins is concerned. So it is bad if you went to school because you know less about aflatoxin than one who did not go to school. Lesuda, if you're there, please comment very quickly.
So going to school depletes knowledge.
Going to school has what we call a deleterious effect. Lesuda, are you there?
Yes, I'm there, Prof.
Okay, yeah, is it true? Do you agree going to school is bad for you if you want to know about aflatoxin?
Maybe what I can say is that I think for those caregivers or farmers who did not go to school, they had more time to, or they always practice this kind of farming. So from their experience, they get to know that when we handle food crop this way, they are more likely to get molds and get spoiled. So maybe I think for them it's more of experience they get as they continue farming. Yeah, that's
nice one. That experiential knowledge, experiential knowledge, and probably why we are talking about competence-based education. That by the time you thought about aflatoxins, you probably have seen moldy food products. Lesuda, I'm seeing another question for you. That sorghum in Nandi has aflatoxin. Explain on the causes. What are the strategies? What I want to do so that we can progress, I can see we've taken 5 of the 10 minutes, is we encourage to share contacts. I can see Dr. Nyamoya has put so that there is engagement after this. You're being asked about data collection tool and how did you ensure reliability and validity. Lesuda, since the work you're presenting is published, I'm encouraging you also put a link, provide if it's possible. There was another question here. I'm not sure to who directly. What insects do you use to enrich the porridge? I'm sure it has to do with the nutritionist. Was it Dr. Waswa? Was it Waswa? Yeah.
I think that question was came from my presentation.
Okay, yours as well. Okay.
Yes, I was talking about the interventions that the World Vision was providing in Kerio Valley. So they are using some insects to enrich the porridge of the children, so that to address the malnutrition. So the insect they use is crickets, grasshoppers. So those are the majorly the main insect they were using to enrich the porridge for the children. Thank you.
Okay, great. I'm seeing some questions there. The use of the word vector was not done in a scientific manner. Achievement of herd immunity will require intervention of social scientists, just as in HIV and AIDS. I'm sure that was in response to Dr. Nyamoya. Okay, then why does immunity wait following vaccination? 2, how can mothers take has been responded to? Tell us more about the 3rd booster dose if you can. I think that has also been mentioned. Okay, let me open. We still have 3 minutes of our 10. Is there any other general question that you would like to be asked directly? Feel free to engage. If none, we've had 11. Okay, I'm seeing Rose Gambo.
Very
dropped. My apology, technology failure on our side. I don't know, could you say, I heard you saying that we squeezed her and she didn't have enough time to say leishmaniasis is an important, probably re-emerging NTD. Prof. Odhiambo?
Oh, I thought I lost you, so I stopped.
Yeah, we are the ones who internet failed on our side. So
sorry for that. I was just saying, yes. I hope you got me, that some of us may not even understand, because this was a review and some may not even understand what leishmaniasis is. Maybe some pictures could have added value to this, but sometimes we see young men and women who are herding cattle in these areas, the arid areas, looking pregnant, and we take it normal. That could be a sign of visceral leishmaniasis. Or sometimes we just see people with scar on their faces, their hands and the feet, and it's not, it's not responding to treatment. So this was part of awareness creation, and we also need to know that it's not a disease that can easily be treated over the counter. Thank you for that, and I hope she will not give up in following that, because in our media, they have really sensitized Nakuru people about the resurgence and also the new infections that are coming. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm seeing there's a comment in the chat. The lady doing leishmaniasis, kindly be in touch with me on Kirongo is giving an email there. Reach out to me. I'm seeing also Lesuda has given a link to the publications for the ones who wanted to see how the questionnaire was validated. Thank you. Professor Maranga, please, very briefly.
A quick one for Dr. Nyamweya. I missed this out last time. Now, we noticed that there is a pattern in the diminishing virulence of COVID-19 with subsequent mutations, probably suggesting less danger in respect of lethal attacks. I would like Dr. Nyamweya to comment on the need for boosters for students who survive from such attacks.
Okay, Dr. Nyamweya, make your comment very briefly. Nyamweya, Daktari, are you there? Okay, maybe not. Prof, maybe you reach out to him.
Yeah, sure. Certainly.
Yes,
thank you.
So that this discussion can go on.
Sure.
Members, allow me in the interest of time. You know, these discussions could go on. I've been requested to inform you that you join the main meeting so that we take a poll. We take a poll of this session we've had together. With me, our rapporteur was Dr. Waswa, and our ICT expert was Regina. I was your chair for this session. I want to appreciate you for the time. Sorry once again for really squeezing it to get us to this stage. Please exit, remember to exit the breakout room and join the main meeting so that we take the poll. I think we are probably the last ones to conclude this one, but we have the largest number. I appreciate each one of you. We were consistently to some point, even for the ones who had to leave this discussion or to go on. My appreciation. Thank you very much, colleagues. Remember to press that button. Press that button. Thanks for your cooperation. Down here at the bottom, leave room. Leave room. Remember, it is leave room. I won't be the last one to leave, so go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. Thank you. Thank you. Yes. Remember, as you exit, you will find the poll. Fill in the poll. Okay.